forgot chat was over there. Well then. Hello everyone. It's been a while since we've done one of these. This shall be Skyrim. It's a continuation of our Skyrim book reading. Honestly, I think I'm gonna move the chat to shrink a little bit. It's a little imposing, I think. Let's shrink it down over here. Yeah, just put you down in the corner there. Or actually, no, I'll put you like right here. There we go. A little less imposing. Alright, so lastly we left off, we were reading the first seed from, it was at volume 3, the first seed, which details the disaster of the attempted imperial invasion of Mournhold by Emperor Ramon III. We're going to start off right after that with volume 4, Rain's Hand, which follows Sotha Sil and his initiates in their negotiation and dealings with Daedra after the destruction of Gilverdale by Molag Bal. Alright. Third day, Rain's Hand, 2920. Cold Harbor Oblivion. Sotha Sil proceeded as quickly as he could through the blackened halls of the palace, half submerged in brackish water. All around him, nasty, gelatinous creatures scurried into the reeds. Bursts of white fire lit up the upper arches of the hall before disappearing, and smells assaulted him. Rancid death one moment, sweet flowered perfume the next. Several times he had visited the Daedra princes in their oblivion, but every time something different awaited him. He knew his purpose, and refused to be distracted. 8 of the more prominent Daedra princes were awaiting him in the half-melted, domed room. Azura, Prince of Dusk and Dawn; Boethia, Prince of Plots; Hermaeus Mora, Daedra of Knowledge; Hircine, the Hunter; Malakath, God of Curses; Mehrunes Dagon, Prince of Disaster; Molag Bal, Prince of Rage; and Sheogorath, the Mad One. Above them, the sky cast tormented shadows upon the meeting. The 5th day, Rain's Hand, 2920. The Isle of Artaeum Somerset. Sotha Sil's voice cried out, echoing from the cave, "Move the rock!" Immediately, the initiates obeyed, rolling aside the great boulder that blocked the entrance to the Dreaming Cave. Sotha Sil emerged, his face smeared with ash, weary. He felt he had been away for months, years, but only a few days had transpired. Liliatha took his arm to help him walk, but he refused to help her with a kind smile and shake of his head. "Were you successful?" she asked. "The Daedric princes I spoke with have agreed to our terms," he said flatly. Disasters such as befell Gilverdale should be averted. Only those certain intermediaries, such as witches or sorcerers, will they answer the call of man and mer." "And what did you promise them in return?" asked the Nord boy, Weleg. "The deals we made with Daedra," said Sotha Sil, continuing onto Lachesis? Counting to the Lachesis palace to meet with the master of the Psijic order should not be discussed with the innocent. 8th day, Rain's Hand, 2920. The Imperial City, Cyrodiil. A storm billeted the windows of the prince's bedchamber, bringing a smell of moist air to mix with the censers filled with burning incense and herbs. A letter has arrived from the Empress, your mother, said the courier, anxiously inquiring after your health. What frightened parents I have, laughed Prince Juliak from his bed. It is only natural for a mother to worry, said Savirin Chorak, the potentate's son. There is everything unnatural about my family, Akavir. My exiled mother fears that my father will imagine me being a traitor, covetous of the crown, and is having me poisoned. The prince sank back into his pillow, annoyed. The emperor has insisted on me having a taster for all my meals as he does. There are many plots, agreed Akavir. You have been ebbed for nearly 3 weeks, with every healer in the empire shuffling through like a slow ballroom dance. At least all I can see that you're At least all I can see that you're getting stronger. Strong enough to lead the vanguard against the Morrowind soon, I hope, said Juliak. 11th day, Rain's Hand, 2920. The Isle of Aeterim, Somerset. Oh, my bad. You didn't... There's... I forgot to play the little background video there. Okay, we shall continue then. The initiates stood quietly in a row. Hold on, let me change that. The initiates stood quietly in a row along the arbor logia, watching the long, deep, marbled line trench ahead of them flash with fire. The air above it vibrated with the waves of heat, though each student kept his or her face sturdy and emotionless. As a true Sigix should, their terror was nearly as palpable as the heat. Sothasil closed his eyes and uttered the charm of fire resistance. Slowly, he walked across the basin of leaping flames, climbing to the other side unscathed. Not even his white robe had been burned. The charm is intensified by the energy you bring to it, by your own skills, just as all spells are, he said. Your imagination and willpower are the keys. There is no need for a spell to give you resistance to air, or resistance to flowers. And after you cast a charm, you must forget there is even a need for a spell to give you resistance to fire. Do not confuse what I am saying. Resistance is not about ignoring the fire's reality. You will feel the substance of flame, the texture of it, its hunger, and even the heat of it, but you will know that it will not hurt you or injure you. The students nodded, and one by one they cast a spell and made the walk through the fire. Some even went as far as to bend over and scoop up a handful of fire and feed it air, so it expanded like a bubble and melted through their fingers. Sothasil smiled. They were fighting their fear admirably. Chief Proctor that's a name. Chief Proctor Thargalath came running from the arbor arches. Sothasil, Almalexia arrived on Artaeum. Lachis told me to fetch you. Sothasil turned to Thargilth for only a moment, but he knew instantly from the screams what had transpired. Sorry. The Nordlag Weleg had the Nordlad Weleg had not cast a spell properly and was burning. The smell of scorched hair and flesh panicked the other students who were struggling to get out of the basin, pulling him with them, but the incline was too steep away from the entry points. With a wave of his hand, Sothasil extinguished the flame. Weleg and several other students were burned, but not badly. The sorcerer cast a healing spell on them before turning back to Thargalith. I'll be with you in a moment and give Almalexia the time to shake the road dust from her train. Sothasil turned back to the students with his voice flat. Fear does not break spells, but doubt and incompetence are the great enemies of any spellcaster. Master Weleg, you will pack your bags. I'll arrange for a boat to bring you to the mainland tomorrow morning. Oh no. So this kid was just expelled? Or... I guess he couldn't hack it. Pardon me, there's something in my eye. The sorcerer found Amalexia and Lachesis in the study, drinking hot tea and laughing. She was more beautiful than he had remembered, though he had never before seen her so disheveled, wrapped in a blanket, dangling her damp, long black tresses before the fire to dry. At Sothasil's approach, she leapt to her feet and embraced him. "Did you swim all the way from Morrowind?" He smiled. "It's pouring from Skywatch down to the coast," she explained, returning the smile. "Only half a league away, and it never rains here," said Lachesis proudly. "Oh, that's not an L. Iachasis? These names. Of course, I sometimes miss the excitement of Somerset, and sometimes even the mainland itself. Still, I'm always very impressed by anyone who out there who gets anything accomplished. It is a world of distractions. Speaking of distractions, what's all this here about war?" "You mean the one that's been bloodying the continent for the last 80 years, Master?" asked Sothasil, amused. "I suppose that's the one I mean," said Iachasis with a shrug of his shoulders. How is that war going?" "We will lose it, unless I can convince the Sothasil to leave the atrium," said Amalexia, losing her smile. She had meant to wait and talk to her private, but the old Altmer gave her courage to press on. "I have had visions. I know it to be true." Sothasil was silent for a moment, and then looked across the Iachis. "I must return to Morrowind." "Knowing you, if you must do something, you will," sighed the old master. "The Sigic's way will not be distracted. Wars are fought, empires rise and fall. You must go, and so must we." "What do you mean, Iachasis? You're leaving the island?" "No, the island will be leaving the sea," said Iachasis, his voice taking on a dreamy quality. "In a few years, the mists will move over Atrium and we will be gone. We are counselors by nature, and there are too many counselors in Tamriel as it is. No, we will go and return when the land needs us again, perhaps in another age." The old Altmer struggles to his feet and drained the last sip of his drink before leaving Sothasil and Amalexia alone. "Don't miss the boat." Now we move on to the next volume. The Second Seed. This narrates the attempts on the life of Emperor Renan III and Turala's birth of a daughter. 10th day, Second Seed, 2920, the Imperial City, Cyrodiil. Your Imperial Majesty," said the potent Versidu Shie. These names, I swear. Versidu Shie, potentate. Opening the door with his chamber with a smile. "I have not seen you lately. I thought perhaps you were indisposed with the lovely Regia." "She's taking the baths at Mir Korup," said Emperor Reman III, said miserably. "Please, come in. I've reached a stage where I can only trust 3 people. You, my son, the prince, and Regia," said the Emperor petulantly. I don't even know what that means. Petulantly. Let's Google what petulantly means. Acting unreasonably impatient. Okay. "My entire council is nothing but a pack of spies." What seems to be the matter, Your Majesty?" asked the potentate Versiducier sympathetically, drawing closed the thick curtain in his chamber. Instantly all sound outside the room was extinguished, echoing footsteps in the marble halls and birds in the springtide gardens. "I've discovered a notorious poisoner, an Orma tribeswoman from Blackmarsh called Kachika. tribesman from Black Marsh called Kachka was the many army at Ker Suvio while we were encamped there when my son was poisoned before the battle at Bodrum. That feels like a run-on sentence. Oh my goodness. I'm sure she would have preferred to kill me, but the opportunity didn't present itself. The Emperor fumed. The council suggests that we need evidence of her involvement before we persecute. Of course they would, said the potentate thoughtfully, particularly if one or more of them was in on the plot. I have a thought, Your Majesty. Yes, said Rahman impatiently. Out with it. Tell the council you're dropping the matter, and I will send out the guard to track this Kachka down and follow her. We will see who her friends are, and perhaps get an idea of the scope of this plot on your Imperial Majesty's life. Yes, said Rahman with a satisfied frown. That's a capital plan. We will track this scheme whoever it leads to. Decidedly, your Imperial Majesty, smiled the potentate, parting the curtain so the Emperor could leave. In the hallway outside the potentate's Versidu Shai's son, Savian Chorak. The boy bowed to the Emperor before entering the potentate's chamber. Are you in trouble, father? Whispered the Akaviri lad. I heard the Emperor found out what's her name? The poisoner. The great art of speechcraft, my boy, said Versidu son to his son, is to tell them what they want to hear in a way that gets them to do what they... It is to tell them what they want to hear in a way that gets them to do what you want them to do. I need you to get a letter to Kachka and make certain that she understands that if she does not follow the instructions perfectly, she is risking her own life more than ours. 13th day of the second seed, 2920. Mirkorp, Citadel. Regis sank luxuriously into the burbling hot spring, feeling her skin tingle like it was being rubbed by millions of little stones. The rock shelf over her head sheltered her from the misting rain, but let all the sunshine in, streaming in layers through the branches of the trees. It was an idyllic moment in the idyllic life, and when she was finished, she knew that her beauty would be entirely restored. The only thing she needed was a drink of water. The bath itself, while wonderfully fragrant, always tasted of chalk. Water, she cried to her servants. Water, please. A gaunt woman with rags tied over her eyes ran... Sorry, let me redo that. A gaunt woman with rags tied over her eyes ran to her side and dropped a goat skin of water. Regia was about to laugh at the woman's prudery. She herself was not ashamed of her naked body, but then she noticed through a crease in the rags that the old woman had no eyes at all. She was like one of those Orma tribesmen Regia had heard about, but never met. Both born without eyes, they were masters of their other senses. The Lord of Mirkorp had very exotic servants, she thought to herself. In a moment, the woman was gone and forgotten. Regia found it very hard to concentrate on anything but the sun and the water. She opened the cork, but the liquid had a strange metallic smell to it. Suddenly, she was aware that she was not alone. Lady Regia, said the captain of the Imperial Guard, you are, I see, acquainted with Kachka. I've never heard of her, stammered Regia before becoming indignant. What are you doing here? This body's not meant for your leering eyes. Never heard of her? When we saw her with you not a moment ago, said Captain, picking up the goat skin and smelling it. Brought you a Navis Ichor, did she? To poison the Emperor with? Captain, said one of the guards, running up to him quickly. We cannot find the Argonian. It is as if she disappeared into the woods. Yes, they're good at that, said the captain. No matter though, we've got her contact at court. That should please His Imperial Majesty. Seize her. As the guards pulled the writhing naked woman from the pool, she screamed, "I'm innocent! I don't know what this is all about, but I've done nothing. The Emperor will have your heads for this." "Yes, I imagine he will," smiled the captain, "if he trusts you." 21st day of the second seed, 2920. Gideon, Black Marsh. The Sow and Vulture Tavern was a sort of out-of-the-way place that Zook favored for these types of interviews. Besides himself and his companion, there was only a couple old sea dogs in the shadowy room, and they were more unconscious from drink than aware. The grime of the unwashed floor was something you felt rather than saw. Copious dust hang in the air, unmoving in the sparse rays of dying sunlight. "You have experience in heavy combat?" asked Zook. "The reward is good for this assignment, but the risks are as great as well." "Certainly, I have combat experience," replied Miramore haughtily. "I was at the Battle of Bodrum just 2 months ago. If you do not part and get the Emperor to ride through Doza Pass with a minimal escort on the day and the time we've discussed, I'll do my part. Just be certain that he's not traveling in disguise. I'm not going to slaughter every caravan man that passes through that hopes it contains Emperor Reman." Zook smiled, and Miramore looked at himself in the Kothringi's reflective face. He liked the way he looked. The consummate confident professional. "Agreed," said Zook, "and then you shall have the rest of your gold." Zook placed a large chest onto the table between them. He stood up. "Wait a few minutes before leaving," said Zook. "I don't want you following me. Your employers wish to remain their anonymity if by chance you are caught and tortured." "Fine by me," said Miramore, ordering more grog. Zook rode his mount through the cramped, labyrinthine streets of Gideon, and both he and his horse were happy to pass through the gates into the country. The main road to Castle Gioves was flooded, and the main road to Castle Gioves was flooded as it was every year in springtide, but Zook knew a shorter way over the hills. Riding fast under trees drooping with moss and treacherous slime-coated rocks, he arrived at the castle gates in 2 hours' time. He wasted no time in climbing to Ottavia's cell at the top of the highest tower. "What do you think of him?" asked the Empress. "He's a fool," replied Zook, "but that's what we want for this sort of assignment." 30th day, second seed, 2920. Thurzo, Fortress, Cyrodiil. Rita screamed and screamed and screamed. Within her cell, only the audience were the grey stones, crusted with moss, but still sturdy. The guards outside were deaf to her as they were deaf to all prisoners. The Emperor, miles away in the Imperial City, had likewise been deaf to her cries of innocence. She screamed, knowing that well that no one would likely hear her ever again. 31st day of the second seed, 2920. Kavas Rim Pass, Cyrodiil. It had been days since Turella had seen another human face, Cyrodiil or Dunmer. As she trod the road, she thought to herself how strange it was that such an uninhabited place as Cyrodiil had become the imperial province, seat of an empire. Even the Bosmer in Valenwood must have more populated force than this Heartland would. She thought back, was it a month ago, 2, when she crossed the border from Morrowind to Cyrodiil? It had been much colder then, but other than that, she had no sense of time. The guards had been brusque, but she was also carrying no weaponry. They elected to let her through. Since then, she had seen a few caravans, even shared a meal with some adventurers camping for the night, but met no one who would give her a ride to town. Turala stripped off her shawl and dragged it behind her. For a moment, she thought she heard someone behind her and spun around. No one was there. Just a bird perched on a branch making a sound like laughter. She walked on and then stopped. Something was happening. The child had been kicking in her belly for some time now, but this was a different kind of spasm. With a groan, she lurched over to the side of the path, collapsing into the grass. Her child was coming. She lay on her back and pushed, but she could barely see her tears of pain through. She lay on her back and pushed, but she could barely see with her tears of pain and frustration. How had it come to this, giving birth in the wilderness, all by herself, to a child whose father was the Duke of Mournhold? Her scream of rage and agony shook the birds from the trees. The bird that had been laughing at her earlier flew down the road. She blinked and the bird was gone, and in its place, a naked elf-man stood, not as dark as a Dunmer, not as pale as an Altimer. She knew at once it was an Aelid. A wild elf. Turella screamed, but the man held her down. After a few minutes of struggle, she felt a release, and then fainted away. When she awoke, it was to the sound of a baby crying. The child had been cleaned and was lying by her side. Turella picked up her baby girl, and for the first time that year, felt tears of happiness stream down her face. She whispered to the trees, "Thank you," and began walking with the babe and with her arms down the road to the west. Damn. Alright. That was Volume 5, The Second Seed. Continuing to Volume 6, Mid-Year. This details the events of the Battle of Ald-Marak between Vivek's forces and the army of the Renan Empire. Second day of mid-year 2920 in Balmora, Morrowind. The Imperial army is gathered to the south, said Cassir. They are 2 weeks' march from Ald-Luval and Lake Coronati, heavily armored. Vivek nodded. Ald-Luval and his sister were on the side of the lake Ald-Luval and its sister city on the other side of Lake Ald-Marak were strategically important fortresses. He had been expecting to move against them for some time. His captain pulled down a map of southwestern Morrowind from the wall and smoothed it out, fighting a gentler summer breeze wafting it in the open window. "They were heavily armored, you say?" said the captain. "Sir," said Cassir, they were camped near Bethel Grey in the Heartland, and I saw nothing but ebony, dwarven, and daedric, fine weaponry and siege equipment." "How about spellcasters and boats?" asked Vivek. "A horde of battle mages," replied Cassir, "but no boats. As heavily armored as they are, it would take them at least 2 weeks, like you said, to get from Bethel Grey to Lake Coronati. Vivek studied the map carefully. They'd be dragged down in the bogs if they had tried to circle around to Ald-Marak from the south, so they must have been planning to cross the straits here and take Ald-Luval. Then they'd proceed around the lake to the east and take Ald-Marak from the south. "They'll be vulnerable along the straits," said the captain, "provided we strike when they are more than halfway across and can't retreat back to the Heartland." "Your intelligence has once again served us well," said Vivek, smiling to Cassir. "We will beat back the Empire aggression yet again." Third day, mid-year 2920, Bethel Grey, Cyrodiil. "Will you be returning back this way after your victory?" asked Lord Bethel. Prince Julik barely paid the man any attention. He was focused on the army packing its camp. It was a cool morning in the forest, but there were no clouds. All the markings of a hot afternoon march, particularly in such heavy armor. "If we return shortly, it will be because of defeat," said the prince. He could see down the meadow the potentate Versidou Chier paying his lordship's steward for the use of a village's food, wine, and whores. An army was an expensive thing, for certain. "My prince," said Lord Bethel with concern, is your army beginning to march due east? That will lead you to the shores of Lake Coronati. You will not go southeast to get to the straits." "You make certain your merchants get their share of our gold," said the prince with a grin. Let me worry about my army's direction. 16th day, mid-year, 2920, Lake Coronati, Morrowind. Vivek stared across the blue expanse of the lake, seeing his reflection and the reflection of his army in the cool blue waters. What he did not see was the Imperial Army's reflection. They must have reached the straits by now, barring any mishap in the forest. Tall, feather-thin lake trees blocked much the view of the straits, but an army, particularly one clan in slow-moving heavy armor, could not move invisibly, more silently. Let me see the map again, he called to his captain. Is there any other way they could approach? We have sentries posted in the swamps to the north in case they were fool enough to go there and be bogged under, said the captain. We would at least hear about it. There is no way across the lake except through the straits. Vivek looked down at his direction, which seemed to be distorting his image, mocking him. Then he looked back on the map. Spy, said Vivek, calling Cassier over. When you said the army had a horde of battle mages, what made you so certain they were battle mages? They were wearing grey robes with mystical insignia on them, explained Cassier. I found they were mages, and why would such a vast number travel with the army? They couldn't have been healers. You fool, roared Vivek. They're mystics schooled in the art of alteration. They cast a spell of water breathing on the entire army. Oh shit. They're going by water. Vivek ran to a new vantage point where he could see the north. Across the lake, though it was but a small shadow on the horizon, they could see gouts of flame from the assault on Marak. Vivek bellowed with a fury, and his captain got to work at once, redirecting the army to circle the lake and defend the castle. Return to Dwinnen, said Vivek flatly to Cassier before he rode off to join the battle. Your services no longer needed nor wanted. It was already too late when the Morrowind army neared Aldmarak. It had been taken by the Imperial army. That's cool. Now that makes me think, okay, if I'm doing a political intrigue D&D game, have that potential of misinformation, and then, oh, that's so cool. I'm learning things reading these stories. Hi, Maya. So next to fire in-game, read the book, especially in a rainy day. There are a ton of stories. When I started reading these, I was actually surprised. I was getting like invested in all these characters. I never really, when playing Skyrim, I collected the books, but I never stopped to read them. Maybe once in a while, but like there's just so many. Day 19, mid-year, 2920. The Imperial City, Cyrodiil. The potentate arrived in the Imperial City amid great fanfare, the streets lined with men and women cheering him as a symbol of the taking of Aldmarak. Truth be told, a greater number would have turned out had the prince returned, and the Versidouchier knew it. Still, it pleased him to no end. Never before had the citizens of Tazmariel cheered at the arrival of an Akaviri in their land. The Emperor Raman III greeted him with a warm embrace, and then tore into the letter he had brought from the prince. I don't understand, he said at last, still joyous but equally confused. You went under the lake? Aldmarak is a very well-fortified fortress, explained the potentate. And, as I might add, the army of Morrowind has rediscovered, now that they are on the outside. To take it, we had to attack by surprise and with our soldiery in the sturdiest of armor. By casting the spell that allowed us to breathe underwater, we were able to travel faster than Vivek would have guessed, the weight of the armor made less by the aquatic surroundings, and attack from the waterbound west side of the fortress where their defenses were at their weakest. That's actually genius. Because they are in heavy armor, they can't exactly be stealthy, but by traveling through the lake underwater, their armor becomes not as heavy and not as tiring for the soldiers. That's cool. Brilliant, the Emperor crowed. You are a wondrous tactician, Versailles. If your fathers had been good at this as you are, Tamriel would be Akaviri domain. The potentate had not planned to take credit for Prince Juliek's design, but on the Emperor's reference to his people's fiasco of an invasion 216 years ago, he made up his mind. He smiled modestly and soaked up the praise. You have them alphabetized on your shelves in your houses, and you have to have a whole collection. Very admirable. I know that's something that I would have loved to do had I continued to play Skyrim. 21. Mid-year 2920. Aldmerak, Morrowind. Severian Chorak slithered to the wall and watched through the arrow slit the Morrowind army retreating back to the forest land between the swamps and the castle grounds. It seems like the idea... What? What is this? It seemed like the idea... opportunity to strike. Perhaps the forest could be burned and the army within them. Perhaps with Vivek in their enemies' hands, the army would allow them possession of Old Laval as well. He suggested these ideas to the prince. What you seem to be forgetting, laughed Prince Juliek, is that I gave my word that no harm come to the army or their commanders during the truce negotiations. Do you not have honor during warfare, Akavir? My prince, I was born here in Tamriel. I have never been to my people's home, replied the snake man. But even so, your ways are strange to me. You expected no quarter, and I gave you none when we fought in the Imperial arena 5 months ago. That was a game, replied the prince, before nodding to his steward and let the dumber battle chief in. Juliek had never seen Vivek before, but he had heard what he was a living god. What came before him was but a man. A powerfully built man, handsome, with an intelligent face, but a man nonetheless. The prince was pleased, a man he could speak with, but not a god. Greetings, my worthy adversary, said Vivek. We seem to be at an impasse. Not necessarily, said the prince. You don't want to give us Morrowind, and I can't fault you for that. But I must have your coastline to protect the Empire from overseas aggressions, and certainly key strategic border castles, such as this one, as well as Ald Umbail, Tel Arun, Ald Lambasi, and Tel Mothriva, Tel Mothriva. And in return, laughed Siberian Chorak, you forget we are the victors here, not you. In return, said Prince Juliek carefully, there will be no Imperial attacks on Morrowind, unless in return to an attack by you. You will be protected from invaders by the Imperial Navy, and your land may be expanded upon by taking certain estates in the Black Marsh, whichever you choose, provided they are not needed by the Empire. A reasonable offer, said Vivek after a pause. You must forgive me, I am still unused to Cyrodiils who offer something in return for what they take. May have a few days to decide. We will meet again in a week's time, said the prince, smiling. In the meantime, if your army provokes no attacks on mine, we are at peace. Vivek left the prince's chamber feeling that Almalexia was right. The war was at an end. The prince would make an excellent emperor. And that was volume 6. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to put this up here. There we go. There we go. I'm just gonna move this down here. We continue on to Volume 7, Sun's Height. 4th day of Sun's Height, 2920, the Imperial City, Cyrodiil. The Emperor Ramon III and his potentate Versailles took a stroll around the imperial gardens, studded with statuary and fountains. The north gardens fit the emperor's mood, as well as being the coolest acreage in the city during the heat of the summertide. Austere, tiered flower beds of blue, gray, and green towered all around them as they walked. Vivek agreed to the prince's terms for peace, said Raman. My son will be returning in 2 weeks' time. This is excellent news, said the potentate carefully. I hope the Dunmer will honor the terms. We might have asked for more. The fortress and Black Gate, for example. But I suppose the prince knows what is reasonable. He would not cripple the empire just for peace. I have been thinking lately of Rija and what caused her to plot against my life, said the emperor, pausing to admire a statue of the slave queen Alessia before continuing. The only thing I can think of to account for is that she admired my son too much. She may have loved me for my power and my personality, but he, after all, is young and handsome and will one day inherit my throne. She must have thought that if I were dead, she could have an emperor who had both youth and power. The prince was in his plot? Asked Versailles. It was a difficult game to play, anticipating where the emperor's paranoia would strike next. Oh, I don't think so, said Raman, smiling. No, my son loves me well. Are you aware that Corda, Richa's sister, is an initiate of Wara Conservarium in Hethegath? Asked the potentate. Wara? Asked the emperor. I've forgotten. Which god is that? Lusty fertility goddess of the Yokudans, replied the potentate, but not too lustily, like Debella. Demure, but certainly sexual. I am through with lusty women, and the Empress Rija all too lusty. A lust for the love leads for lust for power. The emperor shrugged his shoulders. But a priestess in training with a certain healthy appetite sounds ideal. Now what are you saying about that Black Gate? Sixth day, sun's height, 29:20. Thurzo Fortress, Cyrodiil. Rija stood quietly looking at the stone-cold floor while the emperor spoke. He had never seen her so pale and joyless. She might at least be pleased that she was being freed, returning to her homeland. Why, if she left now, she could be in Hammerfell by the Merchants' Festival. Nothing he said seemed to register any reaction from her. A month and a half's day in Thurzo Fortress seems to have killed her spirit. Damn, a month and a half in prison? Because of the Emperor's paranoia? I was thinking, said the Emperor at last, of having your just younger sister Corda up to the palace for a time. I think she would prefer it over the conservatorium in Hethegath, don't you? Reaction, at last. Rija looked at the Emperor with animal hatred, flinging herself at him in a rage. Her fingernails had grown long since her imprisonment, and she raked them across his face into his eyes. He howled with pain, and his guards pulled her off, pummeling her with blows from the back of the swords until she was knocked unconscious. A healer was called at once, but Emperor Raman III had lost his right eye. Good. This Emperor's kind of an asshole. 23rd day of the sun's height, 29:20. Balmora, Morrowind. Vivek pulled himself from the water, feeling the heat of the day wash from his skin, taking a towel from one of his servants. Sothasil watched his old friend from the balcony. Looks like you've picked up a few more scars since I last saw you, said the sorcerer. Azura grant it that I have no more for a while, laughed Vivek. When did you arrive? A little over an hour ago, said Sothasil, walking down the stairs to the water's edge. I thought I was coming to an end of a war, but it seems you've done it without me. Yes, 80 years is long enough for a ceaseless battle, replied Vivek, embracing Sothasil. We made concessions, but so did they. When the old emperor is dead, we may be entering a golden age. Prince Juliak is very wise for his age. Where's Almalexia? Collecting the Duke of Moronhold. They should be here tomorrow afternoon. The men were distracted at a sight from around the corner of the palace. A rider was approaching through the town, heading for the front steps. It was evident that the woman had been riding hard for some time. They had met her in the study, where she burst in, breathing hard. "We have been betrayed," she gasped. "The Imperial Army has seized the Black Gate." Those bastards. Damn Imperials. 24th day, Sun's height, 2920, Balmora, Morrowind. It was the first time in 17 years that the three members of the Morrowind Tribunal had met in the same place, since Othasil had left for Atrium. All three wished for the circumstances of their reunion to be different. From what I've learned, while the prince was returning to Cyrodiil to the south, a second Imperial army came down from the north, said Vivek, to his stony-faced compatriots. It is reasonable to assume Juliek didn't know about the attack. But neither would it be unreasonable to suppose he planned on being a distraction while the Emperor launched the attack on Black Gate, said Sothasil. This must be considered a break of the truce. Where is Duke of Mournhold? Asked Vivek. I would hear his thoughts on the matter. He is meeting with the Night Mother in Tel Arun, said Amalexia quietly. I told him to wait until he had spoken with you, but he said that the matter had not waited. I told him to wait until he had spoken with you, but he said that the matter had waited long enough. He would involve Morag Tong in outside affairs. Vivek shook his head and looked to Sothasil. Please, do what you can. Assassination will only move us backwards. This matter must be settled with diplomacy or battle. Oh, the Emperor's being a dum-dum. 25, day 25 of Sun's height, 2920. Tel Arun, Morrowind. The Night Mother met Sothasil in her salon, lit only by the moon. She was cruelly beautiful, dressed in a simple silk black robe, lounging across her divan. I don't know what that word is. With a gesture, she dismissed her red-cloaked guards and offered the sorcerer some wine. You've only dismissed your friend, the Duke, she whispered. He was very unhappy, but I think we'll solve this problem for him. Is the music too loud? Let me turn it down. Did he hire the Morag Tong to assassinate the Emperor? Asked Sothasil. You are straightforward, aren't you? That's good. I love plain-seeking men. It saves me so much time. Of course, I cannot discuss with you what the Duke and I talked about. She smiled. It would be bad for business. What if I were to offer you an equal amount of gold for you to not assassinate the Emperor? The Morag Tong murders for the glory of Mephala and for profit, she said, speaking into her glass of wine. We do not merely kill. That would be sacrilege. Once the Duke's gold has been arrived in 3 days' time, we will do our end of the business, and I'm afraid we would not dream of entertaining a counteroffer. Though we are a business as well as a religious order, we do not bow to supply and demand. Sothasil. 27th day of Sun's height, 2920. The Inner Sea, Morrowind. Sothasil had been watching the waters for 2 days now, waiting for a particular vessel, and now he saw it. A heavy ship with the flag of Mournhold. The sorcerer took to the air and intercepted it before it reached the harbor. A call of flame erupted over his figure, disguising his voice into a form that of a Daedra. Abandon your ship, he bellowed, if you would not sink with it. In truth, Sothasil would have exploded the vessel with a single ball of fire, but he chose to take his time, to give the crew a chance to dive off into the warm water. When he was certain there was no one living aboard, he focused his energy into a destructive wave that shook the air and water as it discharged. The ship and the Duke's payment to the Morag Tong sunk to the bottom of the Inner Sea. Night Mother, thought Sothasil as he floated towards a shore to alert the harbor master that some sailors were in need of rescue. Everyone bows to supply and command. Everyone bows to supply and demand. Indeed. Alright, then we move on to Volume 8, Last Seed. This details the events that led to Juliac Cyrodiil's assassination, as well as the treaty between Cyrodiil and Morrowind that ended the 80-year-long war. Man, not Juliac. He was a cool guy. Oh well. Let's see here. First day of the last seed, 2920, Mournhold, Morrowind. They were gathered in the Duke's courtyard at twilight, enjoying the smell and warmth of a fire of dry branches and bitter green leaves. Tiny embers flew into the sky, changing for a few moments before vanishing. I was rash, agreed the Duke soberly, but Lokhan had his laugh, and all is well. The Murg Tong will not assassinate the Emperor now that my payment to them is at the bottom of the Inner Sea. I thought you had made some sort of truce with the Daedra Princes. What your sailors called a Daedra may not have been one, said Sothasil. Perhaps it was a rogue battle mage or even a lightning bolt that destroyed your ship. The Prince and the Emperor are en route to take possession of Ald-Lambasi as truce agreed. It is certainly typical of the Cyrodiil to assume that their concessions are negotiable, while ours are not. Vivek pulled out a map. We can meet them here. This is the village to the northwest of the Ald-Lambasi. Letters. Northwest of the Ald-Lambasi Fervinthil. But we will meet them to talk, asked Almalexia, or to make war. No one had an answer to that. 15th day of the last seed, 2920, Fervinthil, Morrowind. A late summer squall blew through the small village, darkening the sky except for the flashing of lightning, which leapt from cloud to cloud like acrobats. Water rushed down to the narrow streets ankle deep, and the prince had to shout to be heard by his captains but a few feet away from him. There's an inn up ahead. We'll wait there for the storm to pass before pressing on to Ald-Lambasi. The inn was warm and dry, and bustling with business. Barmaids were rushing back and forth, bringing grief and wine to a back room, evidently excited about a famous visitor, someone who was attracting more attention than the mere heir to the Empire of Tamriel. Amused, Juliac watched them run until he overheard the name of Vivek. "My Lord Vivek," he said, bursting into the back room. "You must believe me, I knew nothing about the attack on Blackgate until after it happened. We will, of course, be returning to your care forthwith. I wrote a letter to that effect at your place in Balmora, but obviously you're not there." He paused, taking in the many new faces in the room. "I'm sorry. Let me introduce myself. I'm Juliac Cyrodiil." "My name is Almalexia, the most beautiful woman the prince had ever seen. Won't you join us?" "Sothasil," said a serious-looking Dunmer with a white cloak, shaking the prince's hand and showing him to a seat. "Indori Brindisi Borom, Prince Duke of Mournhold," said the massively built man next to him as he sat down. I recognize that the events of last month suggest, at best, that the Imperial Army is not under my control," said the prince after ordering some wine. "This is true, but the army is my father's." "I understood that the Emperor was going to be coming to Ald-Lambasi as well," said Almalexia. "Officially, he is," said the prince cautiously. "Unofficially, he's still back in the Imperial City. He's met with an unfortunate accident." Vivek glanced the Duke quickly before looking at the prince before looking back at the prince. "An accident?" "He's fine," said the prince quickly. "He'll live, but it looks like he'll lose an eye. It was an altercation that has nothing to do with the war. The only good news is that while he recovers, I have the use of his seal. Any agreement that we make here and now will be binding to the Empire, both in my father's reign and in mine." Then let us start agreeing," smiled Almalexia. The next day, 16 last seed, 2920, Rothnaga, Cyrodiil. The tiny hamlet of Rothnaga greeted Cassier with its colorful houses perched on a promontory overlooking the stretch of the Rothgarian mountain plain and high rock beyond. Had he been in a better mood, the sight would have been breathtaking. As it was, he could only think that in practical terms, a small village like this would have meager provisions for himself and his horse. He rode down to the main square when inn called the Eagle's Cry stood. Directing the stable boy to house and feed his horse, Cassier walked into the inn and was surprised by its ambience. A minstrel he had heard play once in Gilverdale was performing a jaunty old tune to the clapping of the mountain men. Such forced merriment was not what Cassier wanted at the moment. A glum Dunmer woman was seated at the only table far from the noise, so he took his drink there and sat down without invitation. It was only then did he do so that he noticed that she was holding a newborn baby. "I've just come from Morrowind," he said, rather awkwardly, lowering his voice. "I've been fighting for Vivek and the Duke of Mournhold against the Imperial army. A traitor to my people, I guess you'd call me." "I'm also a traitor to my people," said the woman, holding up her hand, which was scarred by a branded symbol. "It means I can never go back to my homeland." "Well, you're not thinking of staying here, are you?" laughed Cassier. "It's certainly quaint, but come with wintertide, there's going to be a snow up your eyelashes. There's no place for a new baby. What's her name?" "Bosriel. It means beauty of the forest." That's cute, because of what happened. "Where are you going?" "Durinwen, on the bay in High Rock. You're welcome to join me. I could use the company." He held out his hand. "Cassier Whitley." "Turala," said the woman after a pause. She was going to use her family's name at first, as is tradition, but she realized that it was no longer her name. "I'd love to accompany you. Thank you." 19th. Let's see. Actually, before we go to the next one, I gotta blow my nose. You can probably hear it in my speech. All right. 19th. Last Seed, 2920. Lambasi, Morrowind. 5 men and 2 women stood in the silence of the great room of the castle. The only sound was the sound of a quill on parchment and the gentle tapping of rain on the large picture window. As the prince set the seal of Cyrodiil to the document, the prince has made it official. The Duke of Mournhold broke out in a roar of delight, ordering wine brought to commemorate the end of the 80 Years' War. Only Sothasil stood apart from the group. His face betrayed no emotion. Those who knew him best knew he did not believe in the endings or beginnings, but in the continuous cycle in which this was a small part. "My prince," said the castle steward, unhappy at breaking the celebration, "there is a messenger here from your mother, the Empress. He asked to see your father, but as he did not arrive, Juliet excused himself and went to speak with the messenger." "The Empress does not live in the Imperial City?" asked Vivek. "No," said Alma Alexia, shaking her head sadly. "Her husband has imprisoned her in Black Marsh, fearing that she was plotting a revolution against him. She is extremely wealthy and has powerful allies in the western Colovian estates, so he could not marry another or have her executed. They've been at an impasse for the last 17 years since Juliet was a child." The prince returned a few minutes later. His face betrayed his anxiety, though he took troubles to hide it. "My mother needs me," he said simply. "I'm afraid I must leave at once. If I may have a copy of the treaty, I will bring it with me to show the Empress that the good we have done today, and then I will carry it to the Imperial City so that it may be made official." Prince Julek left with the fond farewells of the three of Morrowind. As they watched him ride out to the rain-swept night south towards Black Marsh, Vivek said, "Tamriel will be healed once he has the throne." And of course, because of what we read earlier, I don't think that's going to come to pass. The moon was rising over the desolate quarry, steaming with swamp gas from a particularly hot summer, as the prince and his 2 guard escort rode out of the forest. The massive piles of earth and dung had been piled in high quantity, piled high in antiquity by some primitive, long-dead tribe of the Black Marsh, hoping to keep out some evil from the north. Evidently, the evil had broken through Doors of Pass, the large crack in the sand, lonely rampart that stretched for miles. The black twisted trees that grew on the barrier cast strange shadows down, like a net tangling. The prince's mind was on his mother's cryptic letter, hinting at the threat of invasion. He could not, of course, tell Dunmer about it. At the very least, he knew more and had notified his father. After all, the letter was meant for him. It was its urgent tone that made him decide to go directly to Gideon. The Empress had also warned him about a band of former slaves who attacked caravans going to Doors of Pass. She advised him to be certain to make his imperial shield invisible. To make his imperial shield visible, so that they know he was not one of the hated Dunmer slavers. Upon hiding into the tall weeds that flooded through the pass like a noxious river, the prince ordered that his shield be displayed. "I can see why the slaves use this," said the prince's captain. "It's an excellent location for an ambush." Julik nodded his head, but his thoughts were elsewhere. What threat of invasion could the Empress have discovered? Were the Akaviri on the seas again? If so, how could his mother from her cell in the castle Giovis know of it? A rustle in the weeds, and a single sharp human cry behind him interrupted his ponderings. Turning around, the prince discovered that he was alone. His escort had vanished. The prince peered over the stench of the moonlit grass. The prince peered over the stretch of the moonlit sea of grass, which waved in almost hypnotic patterns to the ebb and flow of the night wind billowing through the pass. It was impossible to tell if a struggling soldier was beneath the system of vibrations, a dying horse behind another. A high, whistling wind drowned out any sound the victims of the ambush might be making. Juliak drew his sword and thought about what to do, his mind willing his heart not to panic. He was closer to the exit of the pass to an entrance. Whatever had slain his escort must have been behind him. If he rode fast enough, perhaps he could outrun it. Spurring the horse to a gallop, he charged for the hill's head, framed by the mighty black piles of dirt. When he was thrown, it happened so suddenly. He was hurled forward before he was truly conscious of the fact. He landed several yards beyond where his horse had fallen, breaking his shoulder and back on impact. A numbness washed over him as he stared at his poor, dying steed, its belly sliced open by one of the several spears jutting up from just below the surface of the grass. Prince Julik was not able to turn and face the figure that had emerged from the grass, nor able to move to defend himself. His throat was cut without ceremony. Miramor cursed when he saw the face of his victim more clearly in the moonlight. He had seen the Emperor at the Battle of Bodrum, and when he had fought He had seen the Emperor at the Battle of Bodrum, when he had fought in His Imperial Majesty's command, and this was clearly not the Emperor. Searching the body, he found a letter and a treaty signed by Vivek, Amalexia, Sotasil, and the Duke of Mournhold, representing Morrowind, and the Prince Julik Cyrodiil, representing the Cyrodiil Empire. "Curse my luck," muttered Miramor to himself, to the whispering grass. "I've only killed a prince. Where's the reward in that?" Miramor destroyed the letter, as Zook had instructed him to do so, and pocketed the treaty. At the very least, it was a curiosity that would have some market value. He disassembled the traps as he pondered his next step. Return to Gideon and ask his employer for a lesser reward for killing the heir? Move on to other lands? At the very least, he considered. He had picked up 2 useful skills from the Battle of Bodrum. From the Dunmer, he had learned an excellent spear trap, and abandoning the Imperial army, he had learned how to skulk in the grass. Damn. Right when the war was over. Assassinated. Also, I realized I never had the traps. The traps. I never started my my timer for the stream. So since I've been going for about an hour and 14 minutes, gonna reduce that by 1 hour minus 14 minutes. There. I also think this might be a shorter stream just because reading out loud for constantly it does kind of wear you out. But that said, while we are here, I shall keep going. Alright, where were we? Right, the last scene when His Highness the Prince Juliac was assassinated. Volume 9, Hearthfire, details Empress Tavia's agony and her suicide. Potentate Versailles convincing the Emperor to sentence Regia to death, and Toralla and Cassier meet a witch of the Skeffington Coven. Alright. One moment. Jeez, the model goes crazy when it can't see my face properly. All right, so let's get comfortable here. Second day, Hearthfire, 2920, Gideon, Blackmarsh. Their Empress Tavia lay across her bed. A hot late summer wind she could not feel banging the shutters of her cell and to and fro from the iron bars. Her throat felt like it was on fire, but she still sobbed uncontrollably, wringing her last tapestry in her hands. Her wailing echoed throughout the hollow halls of Castle Gioves, stopping maids in their washing and guards in their conversation. One of the women came up to the narrow stairs to meet her mistress, but her chief guard, Zook, stood in the doorway and shook his head. "She's just heard that her son is dead," she said quietly. Fifth day of Hearthfire, 2920, Imperial City, Cyrodiil. "Your Imperial Majesty," said the potentate. Oh wait, this is the lizard man. "Your Imperial Majesty," said the potentate Versailles through the door. "You can open the door. I assure you, you're perfectly safe. No one wants to kill you." "Mara's blood!" came the Emperor Raman III's voice, muffled, hysterical, tinged with madness. Someone assassinated the prince, and he was holding my shield. They could have thought it was me. "You're certainly correct, Your Imperial Majesty," replied the potentate, expunging any mocking qualities from his voice, while his black slitted eyes rolled contemptuously. "And we must find and punish this evildoer responsible for your son's death, but we cannot do it without you. You must be brave for your empire." There was no reply. At the very least, come out and sign the order for Lady Regia's execution," called the potentate. "Let us dispose of the one traitor and assassin we know of." Which is untrue, but... A brief pause, and then the sound of furniture scraping across the floor. Raman opened the door with just a crack, but the potentate could see his angry, fearful face, and the terrible mound of rippled tissue that used to be his right eye. Despite the best healers in the Empire, it was still a ghastly souvenir of the Lady Regia's work in Thurzhou Fortress. "Hand me the order," the Emperor snarled. "I'll sign it with pleasure." Good evening, Newton. Hope you're doing well. 6th day of Hearthfire, 2920, Gideon Cyrodiil. The strange blue glow of the will-o-wisps, in a combination she'd be told, of swamp gas and spiritual energy, had always frightened Tavia as she looked out her window. Now it seemed strangely comforting. Beyond the bog lay the city of Gideon. It was funny, she thought, that she had never stepped onto its streets, though she had watched it every day for 17 years. Can you think of anything I've forgotten? Can you think of anything I've forgotten? She asked, turning to look back on the loyal Kothringi Zook. I know exactly what to do, he said simply. He seemed to smile, but the Empress realized... Oh, sorry. I know exactly what to do, he said simply. He seemed to smile, but the Empress realized it was only her own face reflected on his silvery skin. She was smiling, and she didn't even realize it. Make certain you unfollowed, she warned. I don't want my husband to know where my gold's been hiding all these years, and do not take your share of it. You've been a good friend. Oh, and do take your share of it. You've been a good friend. The Empress Tavia stepped forward and dropped from sight into the mists. Zook replaced the bars on the tower window and threw a blanket over some pillows on her bed. With any luck, they would not discover her body on the lawn until morning, at which time he had hoped to be halfway to Morrowind. Wait. Hold on. Did she just commit suicide? Make sure you aren't followed. I don't want my husband to know where my gold's been hiding all these years. You've been a good friend. Empress Tavia stepped forward and dropped from sight into the mists. Zook replaced the bars on the tower window and threw a blanket over some pillows on her bed. With any luck, they would not discover her body on the lawn until morning, at which time he hoped he would be halfway to Morrowind. Oh, I see. Yeah, her son was assassinated. She already had problems with the Emperor because the Emperor's he's paranoid. So she committed suicide and gave her money to Zook, who had been taking care of her. Oh, that's so sad. The strange trees on all sides resembled knoppy piles crowned with great bursts of reds, yellows, and oranges, like insect mounds caught fire. The Warthgarian mountains were fading into the misty afternoon. Turella marveled at the sight, so alien, so different from Morrowind, as she plodded the horse forward to an open pasture. Behind her, head nodding against his chest, Cassier slept, cradling Bosrel. For a moment, Turella considered jumping the low painted fence that crossed the field, but she thought better of it. Let Cassier sleep for a few more hours before giving him the reins. As the horse passed into the field, Turella saw the small greenhouse next to the hill, half hidden in the forest. So picturesque was the image, she felt herself lull into a pleasant half-sleeping state. The blast of a horn brought her back to reality with a shudder. Cassier opened his eyes. "Where are we?" he hissed. "I don't know," Turella stammered, wide-eyed. "What is that sound?" "Orcs," he whispered. "A hunting party. Head to the thicket, quickly." Turella trotted the horse into the small collection of trees. Cassier handed her the child and dismounted. He began pulling their bags off next, throwing them into the bushes. A sound started then, a distant rumbling of footfall, growing louder and louder. Turella climbed off carefully and helped Cassier unburden the horse. All the while, Bossier watched open-eyed. Turella sometimes worried that her baby never cried. Now she was grateful for it. With the rest of the luggage off, Cassier slapped the horse's rear, sending it galloping into the field. Taking Taralla's hand, he hunkered down into the bushes. "With luck," he murmured, "they'll think she's wild or belongs to the farm and won't go looking for the rider." As he spoke, a horde of orcs surged into the field, blasting their horns. Taralla had seen orcs before, but never in such abundance, never with such bestial confidence. Roaring with the light at the horse in its confused state, they hastened past the timber where Cassier, Taralla, and Bossier hid. The wildflowers flew into the air at the stampede, plowing through the air with seeds. Taralla looked to hold back a sneeze and thought she succeeded. One of the orcs heard something, though, and brought another with him to investigate. Cassier quietly unsheathed his sword, mustering all the confidence he could. His skills, as much as they were in spying, not combat. But he vowed to protect Taralla and her babe for as long as he could. Perhaps he could slay these two, he reasoned, but not before they cried out and brought the rest of the horde. Suddenly, something invisible swept through the bushes like a wind. The orcs flew backwards, falling dead on their backs. Taralla turned and saw a wrinkled crone with a bright red hair emerge from the nearby bush. "I thought you were going to bring him right to me," she whispered, smiling. "Best come with me." The three followed the old woman through a deep crevasse of bramble bushes that ran through the field towards the house on the hill. As they emerged on the other side, the woman turned to look at the orcs feasting on the remains of the horse, a blood-soaked orgy to the beat of multiple horns. "That horse yours?" she asked. When Cassier nodded, she laughed loudly. "That's rich meat, that is. Those monsters will have bellyaches and flatulence in the morning. Serves him right." "Shouldn't we keep moving?" whispered Taralla, unnerved by the woman's laughter. "They won't come up here," she grinned, looking at Bosriel, who smiled back. "They're too afraid of us." Taralla turned to Cassier, who shook his head. "Witches, am I correct in assuming that this is old Barian's farm, the home of the Skeffington Coven?" "You are, pet." The old woman giggled girlishly, pleased to be so infamous. "I am names. I am Mynista. I am Mynista Skeffington." "What did you do to those orcs?" asked Taralla. "Back there in the thicket." "Spirit fist right to the head," Mynista said, continuing to climb up the hill. Ahead of them was the farmhouse grounds, a chicken coop, a pond, women of all ages doing chores, and a laughter of children at play. The old woman turned and saw that Taralla did not understand. "Don't you have witches where you come from, child?" "Not that I know of," she said. "There are all sorts of wielders of magic in Tamriel," she explained. "The Sigic's magic is their painful duty. The battle mages in the army on the other end of the scale hurl spells like arrows. We witches commune and conjure and celebrate. To fell those orcs, I merely whispered to the spirits of the air, Amaro, Pino, Talia, the fingers of Kinnereth, and the breath of the world, with whom I have an intimate acquaintance, to smack those bastards dead. You see, conjuration is not about might or solving riddles or agonizing over musty old scrolls. It's about fostering relations, being friendly, you might say." "Well, we certainly appreciate you being friendly with us," said Cassier. "As you well might," coughed Mynista. "Your kind destroyed the orc homeland 2,000 years ago. Before that, they never came all the way up here and bothered us. Now let's get you cleaned up and fed." With that, Mynista led them to the farm, and Taralla met the family of the Skeffington Coven. Where was I? There we go. Yeah, I think I'm gonna finish up this volume. Then we're gonna have to pick it up again next time. 11th day of Hearthfire, 2920, the Imperial City, Cyrodiil. Rija had not even tried to sleep the night before, and she found the somber music playing during her execution to have a soporific effect. It was as if she was willing herself to be unconscious before the axe stroke. Her eyes were bound so she could not see her former lover, the Emperor, seated before her, glaring with his one good eye. She could not see the potentate Versaducier, his coil neatly wrapped beneath him. a look of triumph on his golden face. She could feel numbly the executioner's hand touch her back to steady her. She flinched like a daydreamer trying to awake. The first blow caught the back of her head as she screamed. The next hacked through her neck, and she was dead. The Emperor turned to the potentate wearily. Now that's done. You said she had a pretty sister in Hammerfell named Corda? Ah, jeez. 18th day of Hearthfire 2920, Dwin High Rock. The horse the witches had sold him was not as good as his old one, Cassier considered. Spirit worship and sacrifice to the sisterhood might be well and good for conjuring spirits, but it tends to spoil beasts of burden. Still, there was little to complain about. With the Dunmer woman and her child gone, he had made excellent time. Ahead were the walls surrounding the city of his homeland. Almost at once, he was met upon his old friends and family. How went the war? Cried his cousin, running to the road. Is it true that Vivek signed a peace with the prince, but the emperor refuses to honor it? That's not how it was it? As a friend joining them, I heard that the Dunmer had the prince murdered, and then made up a story about a treaty, but there's no evidence for it. Isn't there anything interesting happening here? Cassier laughed. I really don't have the latest interest in discussing the war or Vivek. You missed the procession of Lady Corda, said his friend. She came across the bay with a full entourage, and then east to the Imperial City. But that's nothing. What was Vivek like? Asked his cousin eagerly. He was supposed to be a living god. If Shiogarath steps down and they needed another god of madness, he'll do, said Cassier haughtily. And the women? Asked the lad who had only seen Dunmer ladies on very rare occasions. Cassier merely smiled. Torella Skeffington flashed into his mind for an instant before fading away. She would be happy with the coven, and her child would be well cared for, but they were part of the past now, a place and a war he wanted to forget forever. Dismounting his horse, he walked into the sea, chatting of trivial gossip on the Lilac Bay. And that was Volume 9, Hearthfire. I've only done this for about an hour and a half. I could keep going, but I'm already getting tired of reading for this long. Yeah. Definitely gonna be a shorter stream today. It's already 8 o'clock, and I'd like to stop here. I think next time I do a Skyrim in-game book reading. I think I'm gonna have something planned afterwards. Unfortunately, I didn't have anything planned afterwards here. I was getting a little tired already, so I'm gonna stop here. So I'm gonna pause the timer. And close the music, close the book. Let's see here. Where? There it is. Closing that. So, while this stream was short, and there's only really a few handful of you in here, but I will say thank you, all of you. I see you, people lurking, and I appreciate it. It's been a few days. Never mind. I'm not gonna bother you with silly trivia of mine of life. Thank you, Killer. I should indeed hydrate after all that reading. I'm definitely gonna drink more afterwards, though. So with the timer paused, let's see if I can find someone to send you guys to. I do have someone in mind because I wanted to do this, but I did have this scheduled and I only saw it today. But members of the Dragon Council are doing a really big collab. They're playing that brand new streamer game. What's it called? Super Battle Golf. So I'll send you guys over there. And you guys have fun with that high energy after today's more chill story time reading. Let's see. Who's the point of contact to send you guys to, though? Because there's a bunch of them. I'll send you to Aki. Yeah, Dragon Collab. These are my... this is my stream team that I used to collab with a lot. I unfortunately haven't been collabing with them lately because, frankly, I forgot one of the days. I was supposed to play Dale and Dawson with them, but the day had already passed and I was busy. And I wanted to join this one, but yeah, I didn't see the the collab invitation until like afterwards. So regardless, I'll send you guys over there. So we're gonna go /raid Aki Norris. All right, all of you, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening, and I'm not sure if I'll see you tomorrow. You'll have to see my schedule if I'm going to be doing anything. I probably will, but that said, have a good rest of your day, and remember, stay frosty.